Hi, it's Ronald, the Rules Lawyer, and today I will look at the new playtest class for Pathfinder 2e, the Commander. We're going to look at whether Paizo is succeeding at translating the very popular class, the Warlord from D&D 4e, to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. In 4e, the Warlord was a battle commander who gave orders to others, allowing them to take free actions, and also supported them in combat, providing healing, usually in the form of encouragement and morale. Hit points were an abstraction after all. And for years, players in the D&D community have been wanting something like this created for 5e, and since Pathfinder 2nd Edition has come out, so have players for Pathfinder. And Paizo has just started a playtest of two classes to be published in 2025, the Commander and the Guardian, and the Commander is what I'll look at today. We have until June 21st, so about 8 weeks, to give feedback to this class to the Paizo designers. I actually plan to do a live stream playtesting this class with members of my Patreon on this channel, so if you want to be notified about that, subscribe and ring the bell. First, let me introduce myself. I am Ronald, the Rules Lawyer. I am a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. I ran an after-school, middle-school RPG class for 7 years. And support my Patreon if you haven't already. It allows me to do this channel. I don't earn money as an attorney. For more info on why that is, look at the video whose thumbnail is on the screen. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to many of my videos and exclusive content. I did a whole video, over an hour long, speculating on what we'd see in the Commander and the Guardian playtest classes based on classes in D&D 4e that I think they're inspired by. If you're interested, definitely check that out to learn more about 4e, but also I think I was fairly accurate in predicting most things that we see here in the playtest. One thing I predicted for the Commander is that the archetype that already exists in Pathfinder 2e, the Marshal, that we'd have that plus more. And Commander being an entire class, not just an archetype, will give us much more power along the same vein, granting actions to allies, doing support abilities, and leading and healing allies. So I'll basically give a detailed overview of the class and give a few final thoughts at the end. One thing that's striking is that we have basically a martial class, someone who does not cast spells, but their key attribute is a mental score, intelligence. Also, they only have 8 hit points per level, and I'm going to call them a mid-martial. I've called some classes near martials before, like the rogue and the investigator, who basically had strong offensive abilities, but not quite as good as some other martials, and they had skills elsewhere. I grouped the Commander with the Thaumaturge. They're actually kind of mid in their martial abilities. They both have only 8 hit points and a mental stat as their key attribute, and they both have issues with wanting to have one of their hands free for one of their key class features. They are experts in perception. Their 1 weak save is fortitude. They get society and warfare lore skills, and 2 plus their intelligence modifier, which, remember, is probably going to be maxed out because their class DC is going to be based on intelligence, and they're trained with simple and martial weapons and with all armors. They have 2 main class features that they get at level 1. First, they get a Commander's Banner, something that inspires their allies. They can hold it in their hand or affix it to their weapon or shield, or it can be worn, such as attached to a pole alongside your backpack. It creates a 30-foot radius aura. Compared to the martial archetype, which has a 10-foot radius by default, this is a definite boost, and it's gained at level 1. It grants a +1 status bonus to will saving throws and DCs to allies against fear effects specifically. It just needs to be seen by your allies. It has the visual trait. Also, if your banner is destroyed or stolen, allies within 30 feet become frightened 1. Also, many of the Commander's abilities from their tactics, which we'll get into in a second, and from many of their feats, rely on the targets being within your Commander's aura, which, by the way, I think they should have used that terminology, Commander's aura, to be clear with their language. Also, some abilities have the banner trait, which require that you actually hold your banner with a hand or have it affixed to a weapon or shield that you hold with a hand. It cannot be worn on your backpack. Those abilities, I believe, are more powerful than the actions that do not have the banner trait. I'm not completely sure about that, but I think that's true. It makes sense because it requires you to commit a hand to it. Your other main class feature are tactics. Tactics are things you can deploy in combat. They either need to be yelled out or signaled visually, and almost all of them grant free actions or prompt an ally to use a reaction during your turn, and some of them give buffs to your allies as well. You can only incur the benefits to squad mates who need to be there during your daily preparations. You get to designate a number of people equal to 2 plus your intelligence modifier, so probably 6, maybe 5, who are then your squad mates for that day. You have something called a folio, which has the tactics that you know. And I imagine it's something physical. They don't exactly say what it is or what happens if it gets stolen from you. And in your daily preparations, you're drilling your allies in these tactics. You get 4 tactics at level 1 in your folio, and during your daily preparations, you get to prepare 2 of them with your party. The number of tactics you have in your folio and the number of tactics you can prepare at once increase as you level up. I believe it is not like a wizard's spellbook. You're not able to copy other commanders' tactics into your folio. In fact, it specifically says you can choose to retrain tactics, so forget your previous tactics, if you encounter another commander who has tactics you do not know. So there's this clear ceiling on the number of tactics you can have in your folio. Feats also can increase the number of tactics you can have in your folio, or how many you can prepare. The language about other commanders implies that you can't just simply use the retraining rules from the player core book to just learn a different tactic. I've heard this class described as a prepared martial class, in that they are martial class, but they get to change what their repertoire is that given morning. However, unlike casters in this game, they don't have daily limits to how many times they can use their tactics. At least nearly all of them. In addition to that, you can spend 10 minutes to replace all previously prepared tactics with your allies. This does not require your allies be engaged in that activity. They can be treating wounds or doing other things while you are drilling them into the next tactic. The analogies to spellcasters continues in how their tactics advance. Their class DC, which some of their abilities refers to, increases at the same time spellcasters increase their proficiency in their spell attacks and DCs. The commander's class DC becomes expert at 7th level, master at 15th level, and legendary at 19th level. By the way, with each of these steps, you can prepare one more tactic. You started being able to prepare 2 tactics at once. By the time you're level 19, that number goes up to 5. Most of the tactics are available at level 1 when the commander chooses 4 at the start. At 7th, 15th, and 19th levels, they get to add 1 more tactic to their folio, and they get to unlock the next tier. There is no language about replacing any of your previous tactics with a new one. So what basically probably happens is that a top level commander will have 4 level 1 tactics, 1 expert tactic, 1 master tactic, and 1 legendary tactic, generally speaking. I have to say this does feel a little restrictive, and maybe some guidelines on trading some lower level ones with higher level ones would be good, and having more tactics, of course, in these higher tiers would be good so that there's more choices, which will of course happen between a playtest and the final version of the class. My colleague Swing Ripper suggests having only 2 tiers of different tactics, so that you're more mixing and matching among tactics of equal level as you gain new tactics. There are a couple of other class features that commanders get at level 1. One of them is drilled reactions. Many of the tactics grant an ally the ability to use their reaction pursuant to your command. Drilled reactions lets you once per round grant an extra reaction to one of your allies to follow your tactic, which is good for classes that already really rely on a strong reaction, like the champion or the fighter. They get to continue to use one of their signature abilities while you get to continue to use yours. You also get the shield block general feat, letting you soak damage with a shield, which is on theme, in my opinion, for a tactical intelligence-based martial. At level 3, there's another important class feature called Warfare Expertise. Your warfare lore that you got for free at level 1 auto-scales up, the same way that the Thaumaturge's esoteric lore scales up at actually the same levels. Also, you get to use that warfare lore skill as your initiative roll. And you get to use warfare lore to recall knowledge about most creatures regardless of type. Now, What creatures are not included, I have no idea. They give us no guidance. It also limits what you can recall knowledge about, at least what you can know by default, which is whether they can be reasoned with, notable offensive abilities, and whether one of their saving throws is particularly weak. It's not carte blanche on how to use recall knowledge to learn more about creatures. However, these are perhaps some of the most important and often asked questions that many tactical-minded players will be asking. The GM can decide to allow additional questions to be answered as appropriate to the situation, and I think that this language is too vague. Many tables will want to know, for example, whether a monster has a damage weakness, and there's a very little guidance to the GM on where to draw a line here, as appropriate to the situation. Well, I think many players will make a fair argument that warfare lore means they heard tales about fighting legendary creatures such as X. I would appreciate more guidance. Also, I note that this is kind of like a counterpart to the Thaumaturge's esoteric lore ability. Whereas the Thaumaturge can learn damage weaknesses, this gives the commander answers to other questions that are specifically not damage weaknesses. So I think that's the intention here of not stepping on the Thaumaturge's toes, that having this and the Thaumaturge in the same party, they would complement each other. So you and the Thaumaturge are kind of really good at identifying how to attack monsters as you encounter them through a lore skill that auto-scales as you level up. I wonder whether the remastered Investigator coming out in Player Core 2 this summer will have a similar ability, because if there's any class that can analyze enemies and know their weaknesses and tell the party things that will help fight them, you would think it would be the Investigator. The commander's attacks with weapons scale up as nearly every other martial class does. They become expert at level 5 and master at level 13. They get the critical specialization effect of every weapon they're proficient in at level 5, which is broader than nearly every other martial class's crit spec ability. They have an excellent progression in their AC. They can wear heavy armor, and like fighters, they become expert at 11th level and masters at 17th level. The saving throw they most favor is will saves, which makes sense for a battlefield commander. You don't want your general to run away. At 11th level, they become master, and successes become critical successes. But it does not become legendary. So I plan to say a good deal about feats and highlight some of them, but I will be spending more time on the tactics, going through each of them, because it's kind of the bread and butter of this class. While you can use more than one tactic per turn, your allies, they can each only benefit from one tactic per round. So you cannot do two tactics on the same ally on a given turn. Also, having multiple commanders in your party will not really add much. At level 1, they get to choose between mobility tactics and offensive tactics. And this distinction is maybe a misnomer, because a lot of the offensive tactics involve giving free mobility to your allies also. Defensive retreat is great if you want allies to retreat. It costs 2 actions. All squad mates who can hear or see your signal, so this is not limited by the commander's aura, immediately step 3 times away from hostile foes. Form up is a single action, and you command squad mates who are affected by your commander's banner to stride to a space that is inside your banner's aura. And here, I'm not sure why it doesn't say you can affect squad mates within your banner's aura, or your commander's aura, what have you. The martial archetype uses that language. I was actually confused and thought, well, your allies can be affected by your banner, even if they're far away, as with defensive retreat, which we just saw. After reading through the class and seeing how many strong abilities require that squad mate be affected by your commander's banner, I have to think that they have to be within that 30-foot aura. So Form Up is basically a repositioning command to your allies within that radius of your banner, which is really cool. Mountaineering training and naval training are very similar in that they give your allies an extraordinary speed temporarily. And they're pretty crazy. At level 1, you give them a climb speed of 20 feet, or with this other one, a swim speed of 20 feet. Pathfinder has a whole skill system, a graduated system, where you can improve your chances and the speed at which you can climb difficult surfaces or swim in water. And this seems to take a bulldozer over that entire system and let a junior commander turn the entire party into American Ninja Warriors. A little too supernatural for my taste. At least I think it should scale up somehow and not negate the investment that other characters made, taking skill feats and improving their athletics. Passage of lines is cool. If you ever felt frustrated that you and your ally are in a crowded hallway and can't get past each other, this is the tactic for you. Those within the aura of your banner can switch places with each other. I believe that all of these swaps need to happen simultaneously. You can't have the same character swap with multiple people. I'm assuming you cannot do that. Okay, the offensive tactics. These all do something offensive, clearly, but they also don't preclude having some mobility, as we'll see. Coordinating maneuvers has you make one squad mate step for free, and it gets to do the reposition athletics skill action against a foe as that character's reaction. And remember, your class feature, drilled reactions, lets you grant an extra reaction to one ally per turn that must be used on one of your tactics. So this is great for moving people around the battlefield. Double team is kind of similar, but potentially more powerful. It costs 2 actions where you make one squad mate. By the way, assume they're in your banner's aura. I will not point that out every time. When it's not true, I'll point it out. But a squad mate can, as a free action, shove or reposition an opponent. And if that is successful, and that action results in the enemy being adjacent to you or to a different ally of yours, then you or that new ally can strike that creature as a reaction. It requires adjacency, so reach doesn't matter here. Also, your drilled reaction class feature only lets you grant an extra reaction to an ally, not to yourself. End it is interesting. Basically, if a party is gaining the upper hand in a fight, you can do this. It requires that your party outnumber the enemies and that you or a squad mate reduce the foe to 0 hit points since the start of your last turn. You and your allies march forward with an authoritative stomp. You get to step forward as a free action toward an enemy. And every foe within 10 feet of one of you must make a will save or flee for a round. This has the incapacitation trait, so you can't really use this against a single boss creature, at least not very often. The prerequisites and the incapacitation trait together mean that this is probably to wrap up battles against a larger number of weaker creatures, where the ultimate outcome is probably already known, so it helps wrap up fights that otherwise would become a slog. Pincer attack seems pretty strong to me. Every squad mate within your banner's aura gets to step as a free action, and every foe who's now adjacent to one of these squad mates is off guard until the start of your next turn. So in the right situation, you might be able to give all of your allies +2 effectively on your next attack, and your party rogue will love you. Reload is cool, 1 action, and you signal all your squad mates to reload their weapon, their ranged weapon, as a reaction. So for allies who have weapons that take at least 1 action to reload, this is great. Shields up is similar. You tell your allies to raise their shield as a reaction. Oh, I should have clarified. Whenever you issue a tactic, it's voluntary for that squad mate to follow the command. But this costs them their reaction, and they all raise their shield, which is great, especially if you're all bunched up in initiative and you're right after all of them. By the way, why this is grouped under offensive tactics, I'm not sure. Again, I think these categories might need to be renamed. And also, they have no mechanical importance at all. I think this is purely to help the player organize them. Strike hard is pretty good. 2 actions to have an ally make a strike as a reaction. Because this is outside their turn, it likely does not have the multiple attack penalty. For comparison's sake, there is a martial archetype feat that does this, but it is a level 8 feat. You get this at level 1. This actually might be one of the strongest, if not the strongest, level 1 tactics. When you become a 7th level commander, you unlock expert tactics. You gain a 5th tactic for your portfolio and can now prepare a total of 3 tactics at a time. These are somewhat stronger looking. Piranha Assault costs 1 action. You buff all your squad mates within your commander's banner so that when they attack a creature you designate within 60 feet, anytime one of your squad mates attack that creature and it does damage that the creature has a resistance to, you get to reduce that resistance by an amount equal to your level. So if a creature has a resistance to all physical damage or a ghost that resists all damage, you get to increase the amount of damage all of your allies can do to that creature. And again, if it has more than one resistance, it works against all of them. So if you're entering an area with a lot of ghosts, maybe spend 10 minutes to re-drill your allies into this tactic. You must spend 1 action for every round it is in effect, however. Stupefying Raid is kind of funny. You spend 2 actions to signal 2 squad mates within your commander's aura to stride, and one creature that they run past must do a will save or become stupefied. And if you know Pathfinder, that's a very strong debuff against spellcasting foes. They have to do a flat check equal to 5 plus the stupefied value to cast that spell. This does not have the incapacitation trait, so it has a fair chance of succeeding against a Archmage boss. Master Tactics become available at level 15. Demoralizing Charge, 2 actions. You signal up to 2 squad mates within your commander's aura to immediately stride at an enemy as a free action. They each get to use their reaction to strike that foe. The foe must do a will save for each attack that lands. If they fail, they become frightened, and they get a penalty on these will saves if more than one of these attacks hits. Ready, Aim, Fire is very cinematic. Every squad mate within your commander's aura gets to bring out a ranged weapon, reload it, both as free actions, and then as a reaction fire that ranged weapon, all against an enemy that you and that squad mate can observe. This is not limited to ranged weapons. If one of your squad mates has a cantrip with a range of 30 feet or more, they can fire that off as well. And most of those cantrips use 2 actions to cast. Legendary Tactics become available at level 19. So you're going to have a couple of levels to enjoy these, but they're pretty dramatic. Executioner's Volley costs 2 actions. You can only do it once per 10 minutes, but basically you designate a poor enemy to be a target of a ranged strike by all of your squad mates. So long as it's a ranged strike, and all of their damage from those strikes combine before applying weaknesses or resistances. If the target is a living creature, this gains the death trait, so they immediately die. If the target dies, all enemies within your commander banner's aura must do a will save or become frightened too. Valkyrie's Charge is very dramatic, and here's our one daily ability. And this is one thing people who really like 4E Warlords will be disappointed by. There are not many more powerful abilities that have cooldowns, which I observed as a thing in D&D 4E in that long video I did earlier. What this does is all squad mates within your commander's aura heal 80 hit points, and if they were unconscious, they immediately stand as a free action, pick up any dropped weapons, and then can stride up to twice their speed, again as a free action, and as a reaction, they can then try to do a melee strike against a foe if that foe is within their reach. So it's a very cinematic ability, as you can see. During my live stream with Swing Ripper, he pointed out that given the fact that you can switch out your tactics, having multiple tactics that are once per day is probably not a good idea because you can switch between them and exploit each one. And in the discussion I've seen since, it was pointed out maybe abilities with cooldowns could be feats instead of tactics because you're not able to trade out feats the way you are able to trade out tactics. So those are the tactics we get in this draft commander. Now we'll do an overview of the feats that you can get. There's a number of feats that improve and buff your tactics in basic ways that are kind of vanilla. The level 2 feat Adaptive Stratagem lets you change one of your tactics on the fly with a free action when you roll initiative. So perhaps when you see what you're fighting, you immediately realize that one of your tactics in your folio would be better for the situation. You can switch it out immediately. There's a stronger version that has that as a prerequisite at level 14 called Contact with the Enemy, where you get to switch out your entire repertoire of tactics that you have prepared. Thematically, this is a bit weird because you normally need 10 minutes to prepare your allies for this. I do wonder, because Pathfinder has the 3-action economy, whether it would make sense for a feat to allow a commander to change their tactics by spending a certain number of actions in combat instead. And thematically, that could be them prompting their allies to remember what they learned. The level 2 feat tactical expansion lets you add 2 additional tactics to your folio. You can take this multiple times, by the way. The level 6 feat efficient preparation lets you prepare 1 more tactic than you usually can. So if you're level 19 with this feat, you can have 6 prepared tactics at once and spend 10 minutes to change all of them. Or if you also have contact with the enemy, change them all instantaneously every time you start a new combat. Drilled Reflexes lets you grant a second extra reaction to one of your squad mates, a different squad mate, during that round. This upgrades to the level 18 feat Practiced Reflexes. You get to grant an extra reaction to 4 allies. Again, a lot of your tactics require that squad mate to be affected by your commander's banner, which has an aura of 30 feet. In terms of how to increase the aura of your banner, there's only this level 20 feat that we'll get to later. And also this other one, Commander's Steed, where the banner can be on your steed, and if it's a larger creature than you, well, we know how emanations work in Pathfinder, they extend out from the edges of that creature's space. So yes, there are feats that allow you to be that officer on horseback. You get a young animal companion at level 1. You get to make it mature at level 6. They get to go to the higher tier at the same level that ranger animal companions do. Not at the last highest tier, which I think is a omission that will be corrected for the final commander. I noted that they get a free action if you don't command it as a minion at 10th level, which is higher level than the ranger and especially the druid. Another idea we see furthered by the commander feats is the idea of being a battle analyst using recall knowledge to great effect. Combat assessment is like the fighter feat. You strike a foe, and if you hit it, you get to recall knowledge about it. There are other feats along this vein. Rapid assessment lets you recall knowledge when you roll initiative, and higher level versions, this level 12 one lets you recall knowledge 6 times when you roll initiative. You also can be an intelligence-based healer. There's this level 1 feat called Combat Medic that grants you the Battle Medicine skill feat and lets you use your intelligence modifier instead of wisdom for medicine checks. Most characters cannot get Battle Medicine at level 1, so this is nice. There are other feats that further your medic role, including the Desperate Resuscitation feat at level 14, which is like the medic archetype's level 16 Resuscitate feat, where you get to bring someone back from the dead if they died within the last 3 rounds. At level 1, Deceptive Tactics lets you use intelligence to feint or create a diversion. So using your intelligence to distract foes, that's kind of thematic and cool. Interestingly, it says that you get to use your Warfare Lore skill for the purpose of qualifying for deception skill feats that modify the create a diversion or feint actions. And when I look at what's available on Archives of Nethys, there are none above level 2. So it does make me wonder whether the new Battlecry book that these classes will be released in next year, whether we'll see a slew of new skill feats that favor the idea of using your skills in combat in tactical ways. We also have feats that further the idea that when you attack something, you help your allies attack that something. At level 2, there is Guiding Shot, which is comparable to Assisting Shot, where you make a ranged weapon strike against a foe, and if it hits, you give a circumstance bonus to the next ally to attack it. However, the Fighter feat had the Press trait. This one does not. It has the Flourish trait. So it's stronger. You're probably using either feat only once per round anyway. There's a standout feat in this chain called Fortunate Blow, level 12. When you attempt a strike against an opponent, if it hits, the next creature other than you to attack the same target before the start of your next turn gets to roll that attack roll 2 times and choose the better. This is a fortune effect. So basically, you strongly set up the next attack. People who know D&D 5e know that rolling your d20 twice using advantage is effectively a +3 to +5 to your attack roll. This seems strictly better than the feat we just looked at, and it's not limited to ranged weapons. This can be any strike. So I do wonder if there is a prerequisite that's missing here. This says the next creature to attack that foe. So in theory, a smart enemy would attack that foe with a weak attack to prevent a member of your party from benefiting from this, I wonder if maybe it should say the next one of your squad mates. I also noticed that these assisting actions, let's call them, none of them require that the ally, well in this case Guiding Shot says the next creature has the same issue, none of them need to be within your commander banner's aura. I don't know if that is a limitation they would want to put in place or not, but it does make it incongruent with everything else they do. The level 1 feat Plant Banner is interesting. You plant your banner in a corner of your square. It immediately grants temporary hit points equal to half your intelligence modifier to all allies. They only last a round, and every time one of your allies starts their turn in this aura, they get them back. That visual action has to be your banner. Remember, you need your banner to visually convey tactics, so you're limited to yelling when your banner is planted. The radius of your aura increases by 10 feet. However, the downside is that an intelligent foe can grab that banner with a single interact action. And remember, whenever an enemy steals that banner, all allies within 30 feet become frightened 1. And I have to say here that I think that penalty may be superfluous. You're already punished by not having your banner, and making everyone frightened 1 seems pretty bad. And given the risks and rewards of this particular feat, it seems kind of punishing. The temporary hit points from this also scales pretty wonkily. It goes from half your intelligence modifier to your full intelligence modifier level 5, and then suddenly at 15th level, you add your level to your intelligence modifier. I think that can be a little more even. All right, let's look at a few more standouts. We have at level 8, Defiant Banner. This one looked pretty strong to me. All allies affected by your commander's banner gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage equal to your intelligence modifier until the start of your next turn. At 14th level, this becomes your intelligence modifier plus half your level. So for an action every round, you can give probably your entire party significant resistance to these 3 types of physical damage. We also have the theme of the commander raising the morale and girding your allies against mental effects. We have an instance of morale healing, like 4E warlords do kind of as their bread and butter. You can spend an action once per 10 minutes to heal all allies within your commander banner's aura. It does have the visual trait, which was pointed out to me on stream, so you cannot heal an unconscious ally. An example of resisting mental effects is Wave the Flag, a level 4 feat. You wave your flag, and every ally within your banner's aura, their frightened condition goes down by 1, and they get to immediately make a new saving throw against any mental effect of their choice. They then become immune to this effect for 10 minutes, but very useful. At level 14, we have Quickening Banner. This is similar to a couple of feats for the Marshal. Once per 10 minutes, you spend an action to basically make your allies quickened 1. That action has to be used to stride or strike until the start of your next turn. So it's a probably once per combat, 1 round mass haste spell. Confusing Commands is funny. Level 16, you spend 2 actions to try to confuse foes within your commander banner's aura. It affects each enemy, and it does not have the incapacitation trait. They become immune for 1 day, but this does look pretty strong. Demand Surrender looks cool. It's level 18, and like one of the earlier tactics we saw, it helps wrap up a fight that you likely are winning. When you and your allies currently outnumber enemies, and you or an ally has brought an enemy down to 0 hit points or restrained an enemy, you can demand surrender. This costs 2 actions. Like the earlier thing, this has the incapacitation trait, but if they fail, they are fleeing for 1 round. And if they critically fail, they surrender. They drop everything, lie prone on the ground, and don't take any hostile actions against your party for 1 minute unless one of you attacks them. But their allies can still be fighting you to the death, but one of their buddies has completely surrendered. And then we end with the level 20 feats. Glorious Banner looks pretty strong. Your banner's aura increases to 60 feet. The bonus against fear effects increases from +1 to +2, and you additionally give a +1 status bonus to your allies' AC, fortitude saves, and reflex saves. Enemies in the aura take a -2 status penalty to will saves as long as they can see your banner. So this is a passive math tilter for the party. Pennant of Victory is more dramatic, but is limited to once per 10 minutes. You wave your banner in victory, and you and your allies get a +4 status bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls until the start of your next turn. Also a +10 status bonus to speeds and 40 temporary hit points. I actually quite like this ability. It seems like a mini version of Valkyrie's Charge, but you get to do it repeatedly through the day. And if there were lower level versions of this that were not quite as strong, I wouldn't complain. So some final thoughts. The commander seems really thematic, fun, and powerful, and it fills a niche that hasn't been served by any of the current classes. And it answers the wishes of many 5e players and Pathfinder players of wanting something like the 4e Warlord, which has not existed in either version of Pathfinder, really, which only existed in nascent form with the martial archetype, but now we get a full class. It is what I expected. It is the martial archetype plus, allowing you to do more with the power budget that a class provides. I do appreciate the greater emphasis on moving creatures on the battlefield, which is something I kind of wanted more of in Pathfinder 2e when I played 4e with my friends. So we saw that expressed in a lot of these tactics. However, we did not see as much ability to manipulate creatures on the battlefield as we did see with the 4e Warlord, which to some extent suspended disbelief too much for some players. We particularly don't see many abilities that will just move enemies around the battlefield. We get that indirectly with some of these, like coordinating maneuvers that let you reposition with an ally as a reaction, or double team, which lets you shove or reposition an opponent and possibly put them in an ally's way for a free strike. But these ways of moving enemies are mediated by your ally clearly getting a free reaction to move that foe using one of the pre-existing skill actions. I was wrong in my earlier speculation video that they might experiment in having more actions that have cooldowns or have greater action costs for the commander or the other class, the Guardian, in order to have a greater power budget for individual abilities like D&D 4e powers with their cooldowns had. Pretty much everything we see here are at will and can be done with 1 or 2 actions. However, we do see more of a blurring of the martial caster dichotomy by having a martial class that prepares tactics the way Vancian spellcasters prepare what spells they're going to use that day. So this is a new design space where a martial character has a different repertoire of abilities that they need to plan in advance. Ronald from the future here. I want to make a couple of other observations. First, I think the appeal of the Warlord from 4e for current players is the idea of being a non-caster class that does more than I hit a creature, that can control the battlefield, control the situation, kind of cast spells, quote unquote, but in a non-magical way, in the way that spells can have a greater variety of effects in the battle. So I think that is a source of the excitement and appeal of this class. Another observation is that this playtest commander doesn't play well with classes that don't rely on strikes. So a kineticist, which does elemental blasts, cannot be prompted by these tactics to take its offensive actions. And also, maybe there's more room to activate allies casting cantrips. I can see why they would want to make that harder to activate. The only ability I saw is a 15th level tactic, but maybe there could be more support somehow for a tactician class like this to work well with casters. One last comment. I have seen one complaint about the commander, which I remember was leveled against the 4e Warlord. The idea that one person is like the general of the party at level 1, that grinded their gears. You're all supposed to be kind of teammates at an equal level, struggling to overcome challenges together. And I would just encourage people to consider thinking of the commander as a nerd, a military nerd who knows their stuff, who is an intelligence-based class, but is using their knowledge and their situational awareness. They're focused on what's happening in the battlefield to give proper warnings to their allies. Remember that turn-based combat is an abstraction. In the fiction, everybody is acting simultaneously. Okay, so that's my detailed overview of the Commander class. Definitely, if you want to give feedback to the designers, definitely participate in Paizo's official playtest forums. I'll include a link in the video description. Also, if there's anything I got wrong, please correct me in the comments, and also share your thoughts of things you see here. If you haven't yet, like the video and subscribe. Also support my Patreon. It gives you ad-free early access to many of my videos and exclusive content. Also, join my Discord community. We talk about Pathfinder 2e and other gaming. Also, you can play Pathfinder with us. Join our drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I have been Ronald the Rules Lawyer, and I'll see you next time.